a fumble. Goff goes crashing into the end zone.
It is intercepted by Jalen Ramsey.
Robert Wood, touchdown, LA!
Picked off by John Johnson.
Caught, touchdown, Tyler Higbee. It's Michael Brockers who gets there.
A'Shawn Robinson.
Cooper Kupp plucks it out of the air.
Taylor Rapp, who had one taken away, will take this into the end zone.
Henderson with a good run and a first down, still on his feet.
Safety in the arms of Leonard Floyd. Up top, touchdown, Van Jefferson.
Terrell Lewis.
Everett in stride. Wow!
Hit behind the line. Terrell Burgess, 26.
At the goal line and in for his second touchdown. Malcolm Brown into the end zone.
Abu Khan with the strip sack.
Picked off by Troy Hill.
Akers with a stiff arm. Akers into the end zone. Cam Akers.
LA will play for the Lombardi.
Welcome back, guys, to another Downtown Rams podcast. But this isn't just any Downtown Rams podcast episode. It's actually episode 300. It's a milestone. So what we did is we brought on some of our old friends, and we're going to have some fun with this show. Alexis Kraft, Jake Ellenbogen, we are the hosts, as always, of the show. But we are going to have Dick Vermeil, legendary head coach of the St. Louis Rams. He's coming on, won a Super Bowl with the Rams. He was also a member of the Rams in 1969 with George Allen, of obviously the fearsome foursome, Roman Gabriel, all those guys. So, you know, he's a pretty great get. You know, anytime you get a chance to have him on, it's a pleasure. Also going to have on voice of the Rams, J.B. Long. He's coming on, the Los Angeles Rams head announcer. He's coming on. Leroy Irvin, the Iceman. Leroy Irvin, one of the best return men in Rams history, but also one of the best cornerbacks, former All-Pro cornerback Leroy Irvin is coming on. And we also have former co-hosts of mine, Blaine Grisak and Joe Curley of the Ventura County Star. Blaine, of course, still writes for Downtown Rams, so be sure to check out his stuff. And Joe Curley, check out his stuff over at Ventura County Star. That is a lot of names. It's going to be a fun show. Buckle up, enjoy, and thank you guys for making 300 happen. You know, this doesn't happen without you guys. We really appreciate you. And as always, if you like what you hear, be sure to tell somebody, and be sure to like and subscribe and do whatever you do. We're on all social media platforms as well as all podcast platforms. So. Without further ado, enjoy the show. We'll start off with Dick Vermeil. We'll go into J.B. Long, and then we'll have Leroy Irvin, and then we'll have Blaine Grisak, and then we'll end it with Joe Curley. So that is the show. Hope you guys enjoy. All right, guys, we have a very special guest. He's coming back on the show. We have Rams Super Bowl winning head coach Dick Vermeil. How's it going, Dick? How's it going, Coach? Hope all is well, and thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, we're doing fine here in the East. I'm in Chester County, Pennsylvania, sort of hibernating out here in the country. It's an isolated area where we live, so we're pretty safe, and we don't have anybody around us with a virus problem, so we're lucky.
Yeah, definitely lucky for sure. And, I kind of mentioned to you off air that I ran into a couple of years ago at the Legends of the Dome game in St. Louis, but I unfortunately didn't have the chance to have a conversation with you. So I'm really, really excited to have you on the show and get to talk to you now. But yeah, my first question for you is going to be, what have you been up to lately, post football, and then especially right now, kind of during this crazy time that the world's in?
Well, in terms of post-football and trying to make a living, we turned a hobby of making wine into a full-fledged business in 2008. So I invest quite a bit of time on that. Even though the business is in California, I can get a lot done from here, and I do spend time out there, especially during the harvest. But anyway, that requires a lot of time and a lot of moving. Of course, now during the pandemic, our tasting room in Napa is closed, and I'm not doing any wine dinners around the country or anything. So I'm really, like everybody else, I'm in idle mode right now.
Wow, that's awesome, Dick. I had no idea that you were doing that. Do you want to give the name out there for anybody that's interested in checking that out?
Yeah, it's Vermeil Wines. You can just Google VermeilWines.com, and you'll see that we're making between 2,500 and 2,800 cases of wine, 3 very high-end Cabernets, a Zinfandel, now a little Petit Sirah for our club members, actually a little Charbonneau, too. We had a a visual Zoom wine tasting event last night. We had 48 people on, had a lot of fun with that. We make some Sauvignon Blanc and a little Chardonnay. So I've been involved with the wine in and out all my life, being born and raised there in the Napa Valley, and grew up helping my grandfather Vermeil make our own family wine. So always had the interest, and out of coaching, here I am trying to make a living making wine. It's a lot tougher than the NFL, I'll tell you that.
No, that's awesome. Absolutely love that. But you did mention the NFL, so we will shift gears. I do want to get your thoughts. A player that you coach, one of the legendary Rams, Isaac Bruce, is finally a Hall of Famer. Finally. The question I am going to give you is, when do you see his counterpart, Torrey Holt, getting into the Hall of Fame?
Well, Torrey's been in the finals now, and he was this last year, and I kind of believe it'll be next year. So that'll make 5 players off that one team in the NFL Hall of Fame. And I'm very proud of the fact that my personnel department and my coaching staff and I, we brought 4 of them to St. Louis in 3 years. So that's why we won football games.
Yeah, and that's awesome. And yeah, totally agree. I think next year is going to be Torrey's year for sure. And, kind of going into that, with this new stadium that they're building in LA, a lot of fans believe that they might put a ring of honor in that stadium for former Rams. So, just curious, do you have any guys that kind of stand out to you as being players or coaches that, should be in that ring of honor, or any guesses of who might be included?
Well, they've already had a Ring of Honor in St. Louis that I'm sure that I'm in it. I'm sure they will transfer that to the Ram Stadium. And most teams that move do that. But I can't guarantee anything. No one's told me what they're going to do, but I would imagine that. But I think the obvious people, remember, they've got other old Ram kind of players that were the original Los Angeles Rams, the Deacon Jones, the Merlin Olsen, those kind of guys, Roman Gabriel, they go all the way back to Bob Waterfield and those kind of people, Norm Van Brocken, those kind of people that I'm sure are already in the Ring of Honor and will be included in the new one if they do have one.
Yeah, no, I completely hear you there. It's actually quite the history, just going over that. And of course, you were part of the 1969 Los Angeles Rams team that went 11-3 with George Allen. So, you've been around talent from, and obviously, it matches, the type of talent you are as a coach.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. But players win games, coaches help them. I learned that when I was a high school coach. My second year in the league at about 23 years old, I'm coach of the year. We go undefeated. We win the championship. 90% of the kids graduate the next year. We win 4 games, and I was a better coach the next year. So that taught me a lesson right there. Don't ever think you're so smart you can win without players.
Love it. And, we got to ask you, because a lot of former Rams have been, putting their input in on the new jerseys that the Rams released. So I guess I'm just curious, have you seen them? And if so, what are your thoughts on them?
I have not seen the actual football jersey. I was sent a jersey with the color of the Reds and the helmet stripe, a little bit different than that, as a gift from the Ram organization, a hoodie type thing. Not a true football jersey, and I haven't seen the football jersey itself yet. But I'm an old timer, so I sort of like the Ram uniform that we wore better than the one they went to next. And I think I like the original Ram uniform that in the 60s and 70s, and that with the blue and white. I sort of favor that again because I date back to that, and that's how I originally identified with the Rams, and even more so the people inside those uniforms.
Yeah, I definitely hear you there. We had former Ram Leroy Irvin on the show, and he wasn't exactly keen on, changing the logo and all of that. And I totally get it. I mean, you look at this Rams team and this franchise, going back to the 30s, and the fact that, this is the first franchise that created the logo on the helmet, with Fred Gurkey putting, that.
I don't understand, but, I'm not against it, but, you haven't seen Nike change their emblem. You haven't seen Target change spirit emblem. You know, if you get something that's good and solid, you stick with it. People tend to identify it generation after generation. And I think there's a carryover value that exists. And I can still remember as a high school coach watching the Los Angeles Rams play the San Francisco 49ers in a preseason game in LA and saying, geez, I love those Ram uniforms. And I remember John Arnett ran a touchdown back for ran a kickoff back for a touchdown in one of those games. But I remember that Ram helmet.
It's hard to forget that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with your sentiment there about the logos and the jerseys and things like that as well. But something I'm curious is the Rams have a new young head coach. I guess maybe not so new anymore. He's been coaching now for about 3 seasons in Sean McVeigh. So I'm just curious, have you met or spoken with Sean McVeigh? And if so, what are your thoughts?
Well, I enjoy him. I know him a little. I've only had one sit-down breakfast with him for about 3 hours and really enjoy him. And I try to stay in touch with him. And I throw some things his way once in a while when I think I've got a great thought that a young coach might enjoy having in terms of leadership and philosophy and training camp and that kind of stuff. He's a humble guy. He's talented. He's learning, and he's only going to get better. The problem is he started out so good early. You know, you start out your first year with 11 wins and go to the playoffs and get beat. Then you go to 13 wins and go to the Super Bowl and get beat. Then you go to 9 wins. It's hard when you start out that fast to continue to keep getting better. I think it's better to do it the way I did it when we won it all. You know, you start with 4 wins, 5 wins, then win it all. And then get out of there because it's going to be hard to match that.
It's funny you say that because I was just going to ask you, you know, basically you're looking at a flip-flop thing here with, you know, like you said, you started off with 4 wins with that Rams team, and then you worked your way up to a Super Bowl. You know, how do you see Sean McVeigh, you know, overcoming what really wasn't a bad year last year, but I think a lot of people would agree they just had so much talent, and to see them, you know, miss the playoffs was really harsh. How do you see them kind of overcoming that and Sean McVeigh overcoming that and, you know, on their path to going back to another Super Bowl?
Well, they hope the draft will help. They hope that free agency helps. You know, there's some coaching changes made. They lost 2 real good football coaches. You know, they lost a special team coach that I think probably was the best in the league, and a defensive coordinator that unbelievable experiences have been around since, since the Mayflower, I think. But when you lose those kind of people, it's tough. But Sean has done a good job of surrounding himself with good people, and he's intellectually humble. You know, if he doesn't know, he asks. He doesn't think he knows everything, and I think he'll continue to grow as a coach. He may do a better job of coaching and not win as many games. You know, Goff has got to play better than he did last year. You know, the running back problem last year, and now he's gone. But there's a lot of little variables. And the other thing is the schedule. You know, you start playing these tougher – when you win, you're playing that tougher schedule in your division and that kind of stuff. It makes it tough. And you've got to earn every single battle. It's tough. And their division, my God, stop and think soon. Their division, you know, you got the Seahawks, the 49ers. There's, you know, Super Bowl caliber teams, and you play them twice. You know, so that makes it tough.
Yeah, definitely. And I like that you pointed out the division, because something that Jake and I have talked about on the show recently is that the NFC West has gotten super competitive in the last few years. But, you know, especially after this last draft, you know, I think every team in the NFC West got better after the draft. So, you know, it's going to be interesting to see how next season plays out for sure. But, you know, I got to ask you, because I grew up in St. Louis having season tickets to the greatest show on turf in the Rams. And I idolized the greatest show on turf and you and all the players. And I'm just curious, you know, obviously that Super Bowl winning season, if I were to ask what your favorite memory was, I'm sure winning the Super Bowl would be up there. But is there any other memory or something from that season besides, you know, winning the Super Bowl that stands out to you the most that fans might be curious to know?
Yeah, I think really it was the 4th game of the season. We're playing the San Francisco 49ers in St. Louis. The 49ers had beaten the St. Louis Rams 17 times in a row. They were in the playoffs the year before. They come to town at the end of the first quarter. We are ahead 21-0. We beat them 42-20 in that ball game. The week before that we had beaten the Cincinnati Bengals 38-10. Before that, we'd beaten the Super Bowl Atlanta Falcons, the team, 35-7. You know, it was a really but that convincing 42-point game against the 49ers just told me, hey, we are something special. And now we just have to stay healthy and keep coaching and keep our attitudes in line.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you know those scores. I mean, it's like, you know, everyone makes such a big deal about Sean McVeigh, you know, remembering the game-winning play that he used in high school. But, you know, hey, Dick, you're right up there. You remember those scores dead on. You even remember, you know, what the score was in the first quarter. So, you know, it's
that's about all I have to tell you that. It's scary.
Hey, I mean, Total Recall is pretty cool. Not gonna lie. With that being said, you know, you looked at, you know, basically you went through this Rams team a little bit, and you know how, you know, basically this isn't easy. You know, this NFC West is tough. Now a lot of people are saying, well, it's pretty much split. You know, you could see the Rams kind of fall off a cliff this year, or you could see them ascend back to where they were, you know, 2017-18. Now, where are you in that? Because I've seen a lot of, you know, like the mainstream media seems to believe that the Rams are 6-10 bound. I don't believe in that. I have them at 11-5, but not to put you on the spot with all these Rams fans, but I do want to know, you know, what are you kind of seeing, you know, with this Los Angeles Rams team in 2020?
Well, I certainly don't see them going 11-5. Okay. I see them, you know, with the teams they play and everything, but I see them splitting with Seattle, and I see them splitting with the Niners, you know, and if you can do that in that division, you know, I think that'll show that they're the caliber of team that can do better than split with the rest of their 14 games, or rather their 12 other games. But when you have to play the teams that they play in their division twice, it makes it very, very tough. But and you have to split with them. So you have to split with them. Now, even last year, if you'll remember, the Rams came out the second game of the season. They beat the Saints, who really was a Super Bowl caliber team. Then they had the losing streak 3 in a row to Tampa Bay, which no one thought much of that. They thought the 49ers the Rams weren't very good, but Tampa Bay ends up being a good football team. And they lost to Seattle the next week and the 49ers the next. So they lost to 3 playoff teams in a row. Then they come back and playing non-playoff teams, and they kept the losers losing. That's what you have to do. But you better split if you play teams twice that are really good. Otherwise, it makes it really tough.
Yeah, I agree. Without those tiebreakers at the end of the day, you know, you're putting yourself in a bad position. With this.
Yeah. Well, remember last year, split with Seattle.
Yeah.
Last year they split with Seattle, but 49ers beat them twice. And they can't let that happen this year. I know they won't do it on purpose, but it sure helps to split with the best teams in your division.
Yeah, it definitely does. It was honestly really hard to watch that 49er game. I mean, it was hard to watch the Seattle game on Thursday night where, you know, Zerline, who's been money, I mean, he missed it, you know, and I mean, they shouldn't have even been in the position to begin with. But, you know, hopefully we'll see a Rams team that's willing to not just compete, but can get back to where they were. You know, obviously anytime you let go of an era where you had a Super Bowl, you know, literally, like, I mean, it's a little bit over a year ago, but I think people forget that the Rams were in the Super Bowl a year ago. I mean, it's pretty crazy. But you know, I mean, I think at the end of the day, you know, this is a talented team. You have a young coach in Sean McVeigh. You know, he's seeing, you know, maybe the error of his ways last year, maybe things that he may have missed, going out and getting an offensive coordinator, a new defensive coordinator. Although we'll see how that works. I do think, you know, I agree with you. Wade Phillips is, you know, quite the guy. And, of course, the special teams coordinator, you know, I think the best in the league was Coach Bones. But, you know, I guess, you know, we'll see in that regard. I think it'll be an interesting season. Hopefully we have a season, Dick, because, you know, there is some concern about that, as well as there's some concern about the playoff structure with having 7 teams. So, you know, we'll see.
They should have had the playoff structure as they just made it forever. It was, my last year at the Chiefs in 2005, we won 10 games. And we beat like 4 or 5 playoff teams in a row before the end of the season and didn't make the playoffs with 10 wins. So, yeah, it was our fault because we got beat by a loser during the regular season. And that really killed us. But a 10-win team ought to be in the playoffs.
I agree. I actually do like the 7 teams. I just think maybe like a division winner. I don't know. There were years where like when Seattle went like 8-8 and they were hosting a playoff game. We all know how that went.
Yeah.
I think they're trying to figure out what the happy medium is. Obviously, you don't want to have, more than half the league in the playoffs like the NHL is going to do. But, I think it'll be an interesting year, and, I'm excited for it. Hey, Dick, we really appreciate you coming on. Is there anything else you'd like to say, before you head out of here and, anything to say to the Rams fans?
No, well, I'm looking forward to seeing the Stan Kroenke and the new stadium. They say it's a monument to football. I just hope they get to fill it up soon.
Yeah, us too. We definitely, hope that next season goes as planned with everything going on. But thank you so much for coming on the show. I know we really, really enjoyed talking to you, and you are welcome back anytime.
Thank you. You take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Take care, Coach. Always a pleasure.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
All right, guys. Joining us on our 300th episode, we bring back our first ever guest, JB Long. How is it going, man? The voice of the Rams, welcome back. We appreciate you coming on.
Hi, Jake. Hi, Alexis. What an honor to be back, and congratulations on that 300 milestone. That's terrific. Well done.
Thank you so much. We're really excited to have you back on the show, and we're looking forward to talking to you.
Yeah, lots transpired in the last 299, I'm sure. I haven't caught all of them, but I've been a semi-regular listener, so thanks for having me back.
Well, absolutely, JB. And yeah, a lot has definitely transpired. I've gone through having 3 amazing co-hosts, obviously starting off with Blaine Grisak, who him and I brought you on to start. I had Joe Curley, he covers the Rams for the Ventura County Star. So now I have Alexis Kraft, who is fantastic. She took over as my co-host following the Super Bowl. So it's been a lot of fun, and, we've done a lot, but we could talk about the past all we want, but we got a lot to talk about, and we're really interested to hear from you because the Rams had a really transformative, I think that's really the word I want to use, off season. They let guys like Cory Littleton and Clay Matthews, and of course, Eric Weddle ended up retiring. They let those guys go. It's a little bit of a turning of the page. Todd Gurley's out the door, Brandon Cooks. But they added players like Ashawn Robinson, who had a fantastic 2018. They added a player, very long pass rusher and, run defender, coming from the Bears, and that is Leonard Floyd. They added a defensive coordinator. They added an offensive coordinator. And then they had, in my opinion, the best draft I've ever seen a Rams team have. So I just want to start off, before we even get started with that off season, let's discuss the uniforms, because a lot of people were really hyped about the uniforms and the whole rebrand. And I know it's kind of a 50-50 split, in the Rams community. I'm sure, people are really going to grow into liking them that may not right now. But what was your initial reaction whenever you found out that the Rams were going to keep the same colors that people were pleading for, the yellow and blue, but decide to kind of go a different route with the, initial uniforms?
Well, Jake, we could probably do an entire episode on uniforms and logos, and you probably already have. So I know I'm not here to do that necessarily, but my 30,000-foot view on the situation is that in the course of the rebrand, the 2 most important things, both in my mind and I think in the hearts of fans, were the color scheme and the helmets. And then behind those, the uniforms and eventually the logos. I think the colors are spot on. I think that's what the majority of fans wanted. I think the specific Rams Royal and Soul that they've settled on are designed to look fantastic, both under the lights and under the Southern California sun and on TV and in person. So it's a shame that we've had to be in our current quarantine state and not necessarily put eyes on those in person yet, but very much look forward to the day when we can. The helmets, I understand, some people will take issue with the breaking of the horns and the departure from pure traditional horns in that regard. I understand that. I still think that the iconic nature of the horned helmet has been left intact. It's been given a modern, fresh spin, and I'm so enthusiastic about the way that the helmet has turned out, and I think that is maybe the crown jewel of the rebrand. So on the whole, I'm bullish. I'm positive. Of course, your listeners will probably say, well, he's a company man. He's inclined to be positive and to say positive things about the Rams uniforms, and that may be true, but from what I understand, they look phenomenal. They've gone through a lot of screen testing, and when we see them at SoFi Stadium and see them in the high-definition television environment for which they're intended, I think everyone's positive feelings will only be enhanced, and those who are reserving judgment might be inclined to jump on board as well.
Yeah, definitely. And, you kind of hit the nail on the head with the color scheme and the helmet. I agree that those were kind of two of the most important things to fans, just from what I've seen. I think the most interesting story coming out of this jersey reveal has been the bone uniform, which is something that no other NFL team has done. That was something that, obviously new to the Rams as well. Do you have any insight or background on kind of how that came to be, and what are your thoughts on those uniforms? And then, as we know, the Rams will be releasing an additional uniform next year. Do you have any guesses on what that could look like?
Yeah, so Alexis, with respect to the bone uniform, I really like the forward-thinking nature there, including the fact that the Rams aren't not pigeonholing themselves in terms of designated home and away uniforms, that they can kind of mix and match depending on the time of day, the TV network, the opponents, the temperature, even like the player preference. And one of the things that I'm enthusiastic about the bone uniform and the choice is it seems to be the early favorite among the players. And I think ultimately that's what is so rewarding for me watching from afar, is that the players are just incredibly enthusiastic about these uniforms, and the bone ones in particular. And something I didn't mention in my first answer, which I probably should have with respect to the helmets, is this is the first time in my tenure as a member of the Rams organization that the Rams have a uniform and a helmet that are designed to go together. So even that, I know that's a small consolation for people who are not pleased necessarily with the design, but I think we can all agree that relative to where they were starting in 2016 when I joined the team to now, definitely on a great track. And I also, to your second question, appreciate the room for growth that they left themselves in 21 and 22. And I think it's good on a couple of fronts. One, I think these three specific looks, the royal with yellow sole, and then the bone, I think that's enough for right now. Like, I think that's plenty to work with. And given where the Rams came from in terms of uniforms, there's no need for a designated color rush or a throwback right now, though I love when they do wear those two uniforms. And I imagine you'll see some combination of those moving forward in future years. So kind of based on how this unveiling went, what player and fan preferences proved to be, both in terms of how they look on the field, how they look on TV, how merchandise sales goes, I imagine will play a factor here. But it doesn't take too much imagination to see what an all-sole uniform might look like, because we've seen the Rams wear yellow color rush uniforms previously and play really well in them. So I think the designated color rush and the throwback, which I'm not sure which direction they could go there. It could be more of a traditional royal and yellow look, or it could be more of the navy and white, honoring a different era of Rams football. A lot of options available to the Rams on that front. And, fortunately from here, I don't think they can go wrong, because I would be excited to see all of those on the players.
Yeah, I definitely hear you there. I actually just want to ask you one quick question before we kind of, steer away from the uniforms and talk more about, football. Just real quick, do you know for sure if those, like the ones that were shown, are those it for this year? Or for instance, can the pants be interchangeable to the jersey? I think a lot of fans like what they did, but they'd like to see, an option with the bone having the yellow pants and the blue pants as well.
I don't think it's forbidden. I don't think it's by design. I think, as I understand it, and an official from the Rams could very well come behind me and correct this, I think they have those 3 specific looks that they want to use over the course of hopefully 16 games this season and into the playoffs. And I'll borrow from Andrew Whitworth here, who, even if the fans would like to see those other combinations match with the bone top, he, speaking on behalf of large linemen, says that he's not a fan of colored pants and white or bone jerseys because, in his words, they make him look like a big popsicle. So even if that's the fan preference, or if there's some clamoring for that, I wonder if the locker room would agree or resist that movement. But I think there's still more to be determined there. And I think, leaving the door open was probably a wise move on behalf of the Rams design team, because it's not being force-fed necessarily. There's room for decision-making and for input from all stakeholders, I think, even between now and kickoff.
Yeah, and, kind of changing gears here, something that I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on was the Rams draft this year. So just kind of, if you could give us your thoughts on the Rams draft overall this year, and which draft pick of the Rams do you think is going to make the biggest impact right away?
Well, starting at the top, I think they are bucking conventional wisdom given the draft capital that they've spent on the running back position in recent years. And even beyond the draft, the resources in general. They are going against the grain in terms of the way that the modern NFL is trending with respect to how you draft and pay running backs. But that being said, there was a clear need when you go from having a single back receiving more touches than any other player at his position the last 3 years in Todd Gurley, and having to replace that. Similarly, when you looked down this receiving class, and was it supposed to be historically great, I can understand where they felt they were trading from a position of strength with Brandon Cooks, but at the same time wanted to dip into those waters to get the likes of Van Jefferson at 57. So, I am very much of two minds, as I know members of your audience and you very well may be as well. I would like to see a parallel universe where Sean McVeigh and his staff, because of their player development, because of their scheme, don't necessarily need to invest as heavily as they do in skill position players, because they're just so good at what they do and the format in which they succeed. You look at the example of taking Robert Woods from Buffalo, clearly a talented player, but they made the most of his talent, right? And then on the other hand, I can understand that this game has become very much about moving the football through the passing game especially, and you can never have too many weapons. And where would the Rams have been without a wide receiver 4 like Josh Reynolds the last couple of years when you had Cooper Kupp and Brandon Cooks go down at various times? So especially in their 3 receiver personnel packages, I think that 4th receiver can almost be thought of as a starter, even if Van Jefferson isn't from the jump. So, that's kind of my first day reaction. And then I think from that point forward, they continue to really hit on some urgent needs. And I am not actually surprised that they did not spend draft capital on the offensive line. I think they were poised to double down on the group that they had internally, and many of whom had, high draft numbers, many of whom have now starting experience and starting potential. So I think that by bringing back Whitworth and Blythe specifically, they allowed themselves to go shopping elsewhere through the draft. And then similarly at middle linebacker, I thought they might if the right option presented itself. But I can also see how there's a pattern, even under Wade Phillips transitioning out of Brandon Staley, where maybe there's a corner to be cut there in terms of where you allocate your resources. You've had good success getting by at middle linebacker without a highly drafted prospect ever since they traded Alec Ogletree. So I can see why they chose to go Terrell Lewis on the edge. I can understand why their versatility at safety and defensive back makes sense to get someone like Burgess who can fill multiple roles on the back end of this defense. So I know I'm rambling here. I'll kind of tie up my draft thought there, and if you have any follow-ups, you can. But I think I saw a desire to address running back and receiver once you saw Cooks and Curley leave. I didn't necessarily think it would happen on day one, but in hindsight, I think it kind of mapped out the way that internally they had hoped it would.
Yeah, I think, what you said about, first off, the offensive line totally resonates with me. I was somebody for a while getting a lot of heat for not, mocking the Rams picking an offensive lineman. Just felt like, to me, you continue to put a premium on offensive line. I think if the Rams don't trade for Austin Corbett, I think, sure, they probably go with 2 offensive linemen in this draft instead of just grabbing Tremaine Ankrum. But I think the experience that these guys were forced into due to the injuries of, Rob Havenstein, for instance, Joe Noteboom, and, Brian Allen, I think that they felt more comfortable with that. Plus, you have a guy like Aaron Cromer, who I firmly believe can, develop these offensive linemen. And I think in this climate, in this NFL era, I think it's harder to develop offensive linemen because of the restrictions in the schedule. And, you're not able to truly develop, the O-line the way you used to, due to, the whole NFLPA and the agreement. And there's not as much, training camp as there used to be. So I think that all kind of goes into effect there. I'm glad they went with Cam Akers. At the time, I mean, if you were watching our live stream during the draft, Alexis and I absolutely hated drafting a running back 52nd, but I spent pretty much all night after that and dug into Akers' film a little bit more, and I realized that I totally botched that evaluation. I think Akers can come in, and if he, wasn't stuck at, a post Jimbo Fisher era of FSU football, he's probably a first-round pick, and he's probably the number 1 running back in the draft. He got stuck behind a lot of traffic, really, really poor recruiting, and the offensive line was just a total weakness. And I think that is going to prepare him for the next level. With that being said, they still have Darrell Henderson, and I think, they also still have Malcolm Brown, and they picked up a really interesting UDFA and Xavier Jones, who probably should have been drafted at SMU. So you look at that running back room, you look at, grabbing Van Jefferson and, moving forward in another, another year for a guy like Josh Reynolds to be able to develop. And I really like what the Rams have done as far as giving Jared Goff some weapons and, just continuing to buy into him. They paid him. It was a rough year last year, but basically they went out and said, you know what, we're going to go out and we're going to get you weapons. And it's going to look bad, getting rid of Curley and Cooks, but we have a plan. And I think they were able to do that in part because they didn't, like you said, spend on the O-line. They kind of, maybe cut a corner there. And they were able to spend, on other positions, draft capital on the wide receiver position and the running back position. I can tell you from experience, just being at the Senior Bowl, Van Jefferson is going to absolutely I think he is going to dominate when he becomes a starting receiver. He was the best route runner in this draft, in my opinion. And I was not shocked that the Rams grabbed somebody that really reminded me the most of a guy like Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods. He plays so similar to them and does all the little things that you would want, in a receiver.
Yeah, so a few directions I could go with that. I wanted to even jump off about your point on running back there, which is that the Rams have been the exception, not the norm at that position in recent years across the NFL, right? Having a single featured back who is able to carry the load both in terms of reps and also games played and production. And now I think they're, rounding out that room a little bit. And, I don't think any of this is specific to players. And, Akers would be one of them, it's not like, hey, we object to Akers, the player. It's more just about where position groups are typically thought of and slotted in the modern NFL draft format, and how running backs especially have been devalued. You look at the run at receiver by comparison, and you can kind of feel the rest of the league trending in a certain direction. Sean McVeigh and his offensive staff felt like they needed to bolster that group to get to where they want to be in 2020. And that's fine. I mean, the proof will be in the pudding. We'll have to see. But I don't mind them giving themselves more options, because you're not going to have a 3-down, 9 out of 10 drive tailback like Todd Gurley at this stage of this position group's evolution, I don't think. And I'm still very optimistic about what Darrell can offer, as well as Malcolm Brown. But I just think there will be a more balanced distribution of touches. But to finish out my thought on the running back position, Jake, is I think it's a real test of Sean McVeigh and his coaching staff this year, because so far it's been extremely difficult for unproven tailbacks to get on the field. And part of that is because Gurley was taking up the lion's share. But part of it is because other running backs, John Kelly to name one specifically, have not won the trust maybe of the head coach and his staff. And that was evidenced by the need to go out and get C.J. Anderson deep in the 2018 season. So now here we are with a rookie tailback in Akers, a second-year back in Henderson who barely got his feet wet a season ago, and Malcolm Brown. And the question is, with a truncated offseason program, with a group that's learning, virtually right now, how is Akers going to win the trust of McVeigh and his teammates? How is he going to absorb all of his assignments? Because it's not just taking the carries, it's being involved in the passing game, and certainly being able to hold his own in pass protection the way that Gurley has done so well for the Rams. That's a lot to take on a young man's shoulders when he hasn't even reported the facility as we speak.
Yeah, no, I definitely hear you there. I think it's a ton of a ton of responsibility, and I mean, it's really funny because if I was regrading the running backs, I would probably put him at the number one running back after going back and watching 13 games of his. The year before, I actually had Darrell Henderson graded as the number one running back in that class. So the Rams have a really good running back room. And if they follow, what Kyle Shanahan did with the running back by committee, and something that this franchise in general, before the Eric Dickersons and Marshall Faulks of the world, used to do, talking about the bull elephant backfield back in the 50s. I mean, if they were to go back to something like that, and then you have Jared Goff and company, I think that might be your best approach to at least introduce Cam Akers to the NFL game and not put too much pressure on him, as well as a Darrell Henderson that didn't get a ton of experience last season. But moving on, the defensive side of the ball, they add Terrell Burgess, who is a friend of the show. Big fan of his game. They add Terrell Lewis, as you brought up. So I want to get your thoughts on those players and basically how – actually, I want to get your thoughts on the defense as a whole and how you feel – compared to last year's defense that a lot of people thought could be a top 10, top 5 defense coming in. How do you feel, about this defense compared to last year's defense with Wade Phillips?
Well, it's interesting that I think they are trying to get stouter on the edge, and I'm still not sure that they have an answer to replacing the pure pass rushing ability on the edge that they lost in Dante Fowler. I think they've given themselves some options. In Floyd and Sampson coming back, in Lewis being drafted, in Hyppolite, who's kind of been a forgotten man still on their roster, in Obo Okoronkwo, who I know members of your audience are still probably holding on pretty high hopes to. So it's not for lack of candidates there, but I just think on the whole, they're a little bit more run stuffing in nature. And I wonder if that might be borne out in Brandon Staley's defense early on, trying to win first down, put teams in known passing situations where you can really, let Aaron Donald do his damage and put a ball hawking secondary with Ramsey and Darius Williams and Troy Hill and John Johnson and Taylor Rapp, really cut those guys loose and create some turnovers. Clearly they still have to find an answer in the middle. I think they still need a pure pass rusher, even if they do have the answers in-house. And part of what I mean by that is someone who can team with Donald the way that Fowler did. In the second part of 2018 and for most of 2019, Donald and Fowler are pretty good dancing partners. And for a variety of reasons, that takes time to develop. And whether it's Floyd, whether it's Sampson, whether it's Lewis or others, I regret the fact that they don't have a full off-season program to start to sync with Donald, because as Michael Brockers and others will tell you, it takes some nuance. It takes some learning to pass rush next to the best in the game to do it right now. So, I think the strength of the Rams defense falling into their lap has kind of become the defensive front, with Brockers falling through with the Ravens, Sebastian Joseph Day coming on, Greg Gaines into his second year, and then A'Shawn Robinson added in free agency. Not a bad place to be stout, not a bad place to be deep. I think that will pay off over the course of the 2020 season. And then they need John Johnson to have a contract year, right, to come off that injury and play like the fringe Pro Bowler he was before he got hurt. I think Taylor Rapp is going to take a big step forward. I think Burgess slots in as an active on game day right away, a special teams contributor and someone who can play multiple positions in that secondary. And then you hope that Troy Hill is able to play opposite Ramsey along with Darius Williams the way that they did in that month of December, because that was, a dream. And I know all the attention went to Marcus Peters because of the way he played for the Ravens, and good for him. But I haven't lost any confidence in what this secondary can be with Ramsey leading the way in his shoes.
Yeah, I totally agree there, especially, your sentiment kind of on that edge rush and what's going to happen there. That's certainly going to be something to watch going into next season for sure. But another question I have for you is just looking at this entire Rams roster, who are some sleepers that fans should pay attention to for next season?
Ooh, good question. The first thought that pops into my mind would be guard, because with Austin Blythe signing on for another year with the Rams, it seems, and I've actually heard this from Sean McVeigh, so it doesn't need to be reading tea leaves. He's going to be your starting center. At least that's the design. And that would leave, I would think, David Edwards, Austin Corbett, and Joe Noteboom to likely settle the guard positions. And if Edwards and Corbett are thought of the incumbents and Noteboom, if he's healthy, a challenger, I think that sets up well. But they need great guard play from at least two out of those three, if not all three, and then some. So guard is one of the spots I'm definitely going to have my eye on, because I think that between Bobby and Havenstein, they're going to get the answer they want at right tackle. And then, obviously bringing Whitworth back at left puts them in a very good position, even at age 38. So I think guard, without giving you some names, but without picking one of them, would be an area where I'm hoping the Rams can find a breakout star, someone who's achieving, at a Roger Saffold type level, even though that's a lot to ask. Where else would I look? How about either Traven Howard or Micah Kaiser absorbing reps at inside linebacker? That's probably an area of opportunity where I see, the Rams saying we can get by with who we have. And so, I've heard Les Snead speak very highly of Micah Kaiser, and he was in line to be the starter before the preseason injury last year. So why not give him that nod again coming into 2020? And then I'll pick one more, and I think I'm going to say Darius Williams, believe it or not, because you can never have too many corners. I think the Rams are deep at that position. Part of the reason why they were able to let Nickel Roby-Coleman go in free agency. But Williams had his hands on the football throughout the summer to earn his keep. And then when he got his chance in December, I think he would have had 3 interceptions if he caught the easiest one in Dallas, as my memory serves. So I'm really interested to see. He just seems to have a knack for the football, and whoever's playing opposite Ramsey, is going to get plenty of targets. So I'll go with Williams in the secondary to break out.
Yeah, I definitely like those, guys that you mentioned. Of course, Williams is a sleeper for sure. Not somebody that everybody knows, but is somebody that could become a household name if he gets an opportunity to start across from Jalen Ramsey. One guy that I'm really interested in, and I think you mentioned him earlier, and you could tell me if, I'm wrong to think this way or not, but Ja'Kai Polite, he was my number 3 edge defender in the draft last year. I wanted the Rams to draft him in the first round when it was possible. It was kind of weird how his fall from grace because of the NFL Combine, and then hearing the story about how he only wanted to be drafted by the Rams, and then the Jets draft him, and then they cut him. He goes to the Seattle Seahawks, practice squad. He's cut like literally the week of, and then the Rams pick him up, and they basically stashed him all year long. So, I mean, it kind of goes to show you, maybe that, interaction that he had with Sean McVeigh actually went a long way and kept him on the roster, got a futures contract, and he'll compete this year. But I just love his bend off the edge, the fact he could win with speed, he can win with power. People put way too much of a premium in his testing numbers. I think he plays way faster on the field. And I think in a room where, yes, Terrell Lewis is probably going to start just by default, somebody like Leonard Floyd is probably going to start by default, and then you have your Obo Okoronkwo and guys like that. I still think that there's no clear cut like future there because Terrell Lewis isn't proven either. I mean, he's he just got drafted, and I think Hyppolite could sneak into the starting lineup if given the opportunity. How big of a role could you see him playing in 2020?
I think the edge depth chart is maybe the position group I'm most interested in a traditional training camp setting for a couple of reasons. One, because of the options there, the intriguing options. Two, because of the lack of established starters there. And then thirdly, because Brandon Staley is the new defensive coordinator, and that's the position group that he came up with, right? We know him because of the work he did with edge rushers in Chicago and subsequently Denver. And so he comes in, and I do think this is kind of his role and responsibility, right? Take the options that you have. We think there are at least 5, maybe 6 viable starting candidates in the room right now. And to use Wade Phillips as an example, Wade deployed that position group in very specific downs and distances and roles and responsibilities. There were even active, inactive decisions being made week to week, depending on the opponent and what they needed from the edge. So I wonder if it'll be that specific or maybe even more matchup driven. So whether it's Floyd, Sampson, Lewis, Polite, Obo, I think there are answers there. I just don't know which ones they are specifically and in what proportions yet. But to finish with Polite, who is kind of the premise of this question, we know the reason for skepticism, right? If you're drafted where you were and you're already on your third team and you spent last year on the practice squad, not a great sign. However, he's 22 years of age, like newly 22, I believe. So there's still a lot of football ahead of this young man. And the fact that the Rams at the end of last year wanted him back after spending time on their practice squad last year, I will take as a positive sign that he is firmly in consideration for pass rushing reps with the Rams in 2020.
And I got to ask you, JB, just because I know that this is the burning question on everybody's minds, but the kicker position, what do you think is going to happen there? Because we have, I believe, 3 kickers on our roster now, 2 or 3, and it's kind of an open competition. So what's your bold prediction for what's going to happen at kicker?
I think you probably would lean towards the drafted prospect in Samuel Sloman. Having heard what they liked about him, evaluating his college work, I could see why he would be just ahead of the other 2 at the start. But the other 2 have professional experience. And I know it's not NFL experience, but I don't think that can be overlooked, especially when there's uncertainty regarding, when's the first time that they're going to line up with Jake McQuaid and Johnny Hecker and actually put toe to leather. So, I don't think necessarily that this is something that needs to be decided anytime soon. I think you might as well keep all 3 for the duration of whatever preseason you do have. And why not let it be a true competition? Like if I had a sense of who it might be, or if I had a preference, it wouldn't much matter, because I think all 3 of these will get enough opportunity to just decide it either statistically or based on, the gut feel of the coaching staff and what Bono wants to do. So Sloman seems great to me from what I've heard about him as a prospect and why the Rams were excited to get a couple of extra 7th-round picks in the trade that they executed with Houston to make sure that they could select their preferred kicker before the draft was done and not have to fight it out in college free agency. But it's telling to me that they haven't jettisoned Liram or Austin McGinnis either, because they do want it to be a 3-horse race.
It's certainly interesting, and obviously it's the position you're put in when anytime you get a guy like Greg Zuerlein, who is, forever going to be etched in Rams history, kicking the field goal to send them. Of course, you were on the call, kicking the field goal to send them to the Super Bowl. But, I don't see anything wrong with the 3-way competition, and I guess, we'll see who wins that. JB, thanks so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. Always a pleasure to have you on. You're so knowledgeable and, very professional the way you carry yourself. So it's always a pleasure. Adds a little bit of, extra professionalism to the podcast. And can't wait to have you back on again. And can't wait to watch the Rams this year.
I appreciate that. Good to hear from you, Jake and Alexis. I hope you and your loved ones are doing well, in good health and good spirits. And here's to your next 300 episodes.
Yeah, thank you so much, and you too as well. Just take care.
All right, guys. Friend of the podcast, Rams legend, cornerback Leroy Irvin is back on the show. Leroy, we are so excited to bring you on. I know this is the first time Alexis is getting a chance to talk with you. Last time I saw you was at your birthday party. So just love having you back on, man. Hope all is well, and thanks again for joining us.
Hey, hey, man, anytime I can be on the show, I love it, man. I just, Jake, man, you my dude, man. 60th birthday party, you were there, man. So whenever you need me to say something good or bad, I'll do it.
Well, I appreciate that, my man.
Yeah, and this is my first time getting to talk to you, and I've been really, really excited about this. We follow each other on Twitter and have communicated on there, but this is my first time getting to, talk to you in a format like this. So I was really excited. And, the first thing that we kind of wanted to talk to you about the biggest Rams news that come out this month, and that's the uniforms. So we just kind of wanted to hear your thoughts on the uniforms, and if maybe you saw a preview of the uniforms before they released, and how that went.
I don't know if Mercedes will ever change their logo. You know what I mean? I don't know if BMW will ever change their logo. I don't know if Cadillac or Ford or Coca-Cola or Pepsi will ever change their logo. I don't know if the Packers would ever change their logos. The Raiders went from Oakland to L.A. to Oakland to Las Vegas, and they didn't change the logo. So I don't understand the logo change. And I'm like a lot of players, especially my buddy Eric. We just don't think that – I don't like the logo. But I guess I got to deal with the logo. I don't work for the Rams. Rams don't pay me any money. I'm still a Ram fan. But, the logo separates the eras of people. In the 60s and 70s, there was a Deacon Jones logo with the colors. But that was because of TV. There was only black and white TV. Then the Orange County or Anaheim Rams came, and we got the blue and gold. And then we go to St. Louis, and they change it. And we come back to L.A., and they change it. Now they're changing it again. So as players, we're separated by the logo. And we should be all on the same team.
Hey, I hear you, man. Leroy, Alexis and I weren't too thrilled about the logos, but I'm actually really interested to hear your thoughts on the uniforms, because I know the uniforms, it's kind of hit or miss. I, for one, actually like them. I don't love them, and I do feel like they missed the mark. You can still like something and feel like it could have been better. And that's kind of like where I'm at. I know Alexis does not like the bone uniform. She really liked the idea of having just a crisp white color. But what were your thoughts as somebody that played in the greatest uniforms to ever exist in the NFL?
Just win. Just win. Just go to the playoffs. You know what I mean? Just win. Just because you wear a prom dress don't mean you're going to be the prom queen. Just win. They focusing on all these other things, the color of the uniform, the new design, all this kind of stuff. Is that going to buy you a win? Is that going to buy you a win? Is that going to buy you a running game? Huh? Is that going to buy you a secondary? You know what I mean? Is that going to buy you a kicker? It's not going to – just win, baby. Like Al Davis used to say, just win. We get so focused in, oh, whoa, we're going to reinvent the wheel. We're going to reinvent the wheel. Like Fred Dreyer was telling me, why are you guys trying to change what already works? So anyway, the uniforms, the Rams are the only team in the league, or maybe there's some more teams in the league that have 15 different uniform combinations. I mean, we had 2. I mean, the Raiders got 2. You know, Cowboys got 2. You know, Green Bay Packers got 2. The establishment franchises, the Redskins, they got 2. The establishment franchises, the ones that, you know, are going to be here forever, they don't change their uniforms. I like the old uniforms. Go back to the Deacon Jones uniforms or go to the 80s Rams uniforms. But come on. You're going to dilly-dally with this and this and this. Just win some damn games.
I totally agree there. And, you know, you bring up a really great point about winning, because I think that's what, you know, most of us Rams fans is we're dying to win, and we want to win as much as we can. And I think the first step, you know, in any season, off season to winning is the draft. So I just was curious to ask you if you watched the draft and what your thoughts were on some of the players that we picked up, and especially on kind of the big name player that we picked, Cam Akers, who is the running back that we took 52nd overall.
Okay. Correct me if I'm wrong. We signed Curley for $50-some million. Okay? Then we release him and still owe him $10 million. Okay? And then we go draft a running back. Okay? When there were a lot of free agent running backs out there. Then we give up all our picks for the cornerback from Jacksonville, and then we ain't even paid him. He is now franchise tagged. So salary cap wise, you know, I think it kind of hurt us this year with the salary cap. Akers, you know, he might be a good running back. Who knows? Teams don't run the football anymore anyway. So the running back position used to be the number 1 position on the team. Now it's not. And now it's receivers, it's cornerbacks, pass rushers, and quarterbacks. So the draft, you know, I just think that we have to you know, we pay too few guys too much money. I mean, you know, Goff getting $30 million. I mean, really? But don't get me wrong, I love Jared Goff. I think you get whatever you can get, and that's what you get. But, you know, I think the draft wasn't our best friend because we got rid of better players than we got. And that's my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it was kind of crazy, you know, this off season. I knew there was going to be a lot of change, but it seemed weird to kind of, you know, go through an off season where you lose Todd Gurley and you lose Brandon Cooks and you don't bring back Cory Littleton. I do want to ask you your thoughts because I know linebackers were more respected back in the time that you played, and now it seems like that's not really the case. You know, what do you think about the Rams' decision to not bring back Cory Littleton, which is by far, arguably, I would say their weakest position on the entire team right now. What would you say about that?
Okay, it's about numbers, okay? You have a salary cap of $180 million. You're paying Goff $30. You're paying Donald $25. You know what I'm saying? And then you got a couple other players making $10 and $15. That's almost $80 million. And you got to pay 50 other guys $100 million. So you can't pay everybody. You just can't do that now. In my era, we didn't have this problem because there was no salary cap. But now with free agency and the salary cap, you can't pay everybody. You just can't pay everybody. And sometimes people have to go. And the unfortunate part about it is, you know, you got Jalen Ramsey on an unfriendly cap hit. You got Curley, which you still owe money to, you know, and you're backed up against the cap, and you have to make tough decisions. How are you going to sign your rookies when you're right at the cap? You know, so sometimes you have to subtract to gain. Littleton, man, what a class act that guy is, man. I've talked to him several times, man. I love him, man. He's a family guy, fan friendly, everything. But when it comes time to cutting bait, he was one of the guys you got to cut bait with, because in this day and age in football, it's a six DB set. It's 6 DBs, 4 linemen, and 1 linebacker. You know what I mean? So unless you're a great pass rusher and you're getting 8-10 sacks a year and you're making over $10 million, sometimes you just price yourself out of the market.
Yeah, definitely. You bring up some great points there. And in this next question, forgive me if I butcher it, but I wanted to ask you, because I was curious to ask a defensive mind this question about the Rams' defensive scheme going into next year. We've seen in the past couple of years the Rams have played 3 up front as opposed to 4, which is something that arguably we can do because we have Aaron Donald up there. But do you think going into next season, do you think the Rams should stick with that 3-4, or maybe go back to that 4-3 now that we are kind of thin at the linebacker position?
Well, since Wade Phillips is gone, okay, he liked the 3-4. But you got Donald, who's making $25 million. Okay, Donald making $25 million. Okay, you got rid of Talib. Now you have to make Donald earn his money. And the way you make him earn his money is you put him in a 4-3. You put him in a 4-3. You gotta run a 4-3. Okay, number one, you gotta run a 4-3 because now you got Jalen Ramsey. You're paying $18 million to. You gotta have him be a shutdown corner. Okay, and you got a secondary that's pretty good with Taylor Rapp and the other got kids. And so you go to a 4-3. You have less linebackers. You're gonna play 6 DBs anyway, 5 DBs most of the time. And so I think for sure the Rams go to a 4-3. They have to.
Yeah, now here's an interesting thing here, and I brought this up off the air, but you of course wore 47. You made 47 an iconic number in Rams history, and one of the UDFAs that the Rams added to their roster was Greg Reeves. Greg Reeves is somebody that has come on our show. He was somebody that was well respected coming out of South Florida. If there's anything, any words of encouragement or anything, what can you say to somebody like Greg Reeves that's taking up the mantle of, your number of 47?
I embrace any person, any DB that wears 47 on the Rams. They become my instant friend. And you know something? Here's how he can help me, okay? Here's how Mr. Reeves can help me. He can go out there and ball his butt off. And when the announcers talk about 47, they're going to say, damn, Leroy Irvin used to wear 47. So I want him to do great. I want him to be the best Rams player in history wearing 47. Because you know why? As he goes up that ladder, I go up the ladder with him. And, hey, it's all about being recognized. So good luck to him. I'm in this corner. I hope I can meet him one day and talk to him because it'd be a pleasure for me.
That's awesome. I love that answer. And, we hope that he does that as well. We've talked to him a couple times and he's a really awesome guy. And, I was kind of curious to hear your thoughts. I think everyone right now is kind of, with everything going on in the world, we're wondering if there's going to be, fans in stadiums come fall, come football season. But I was just curious, SoFi Stadium, this was supposed to be the Rams' inaugural season in the new stadium. Have you seen it in person yet? And if so, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, because I know the construction crew has built it. And I know one thing, shit, I'd be out of business if I was staying cranky. They say it's going to cost $2 billion. Now they talking about I got to give them $4 more billion more. I'll be like, okay, you guys, foreclose on me because I can't pay that $4 billion more. But I've seen the stadium. I think what the NFL needs to do is they need to invest in safety measures where every fan gets into, and we're proposing this to the Rams now. Eric Dickerson and I are proposing this to the Rams now, that we get face masks for everybody that comes in the stadium with hand sanitizers. And you have, everybody comes and gets a hand sanitizer and face mask. It's going to be difficult. You go every other seat, unless you're a family of four and you're together, but you space people out. You may not have as many fans in the stadium, but you eliminate a lot of the seats. Like one row is for fans, next row empty. One row for fans, next row empty. You start doing things like that, and you have protocols where you keep the players quarantined through the season. If they want to make their money, okay, they got to be quarantined with their families during the season, period. In a hotel, the Bonaventure, Wilshire, somewhere. We say, okay, look, the Rams are in this facility, we're quarantined. Whoever comes in the door, you do something like that. And I think they can still have the season because, you're in open air facilities, and maybe the owners don't make as much money, but they'll make more money with live TV.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you, Leroy. I think, we're going to have to make sacrifices. If, we, the fans, the NFL, the players, the coaches, the sacrifices have to be made during this time. So I completely agree with you and ED. I think that's definitely the right approach. And I think, us fans in general would be totally okay with that because, at the end of the day, would you rather have, the opportunity to go to a game and maybe, it's harder to get tickets because, there's limited seating and you have, your rows that are cut off? Or would you rather have no chance to go to any of the games this year and watch everything on TV and basically be forced to do so? I think people would, go with the first option. So I agree with you. Hey, we really appreciate you coming on, my man. We'll have to, of course we'll keep in touch, but we'll have to check back on you, during the season. Do you have any final thoughts on the 2020 to 2021 LA Rams team coming into this season?
The problem is going to be, I think the Rams have a better opportunity than other teams with new coaching staffs and stuff because it's going to hurt the Rams if they don't have Wade. You know what I mean? Wade, man, I love Wade Phillips. They don't have him. It's going to hurt them because now you got to put in a defense that you can't practice. You know what I mean? And so
Absolutely.
You're going to go up against the 49ers, the Cardinals, and in Seattle, who have the same systems in place. So they have to train their rookies on a new system. But you got the Rams with a lot of new questions, new defensive coordinator. Special teams is going to be different. New special teams coach. So a lot of the things that other teams are used to doing and are familiar with, the Rams aren't going to be familiar with. So it's going to hurt them early on, especially without the OTAs and the summer practice. They might get the season going, but it's going to be limited practices, limited opportunities to teach your guys what you want them to do. So it may be a little difficult for us coming out of the chute in the NFC West.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's something that, I've touched on as well, but, I'm excited to see everything play out. I'm ready for sports, especially football. So I can't wait for NFL season to come back around again. But thank you so much, Leroy, for coming on the show. It was awesome talking to you. You're awesome, and you are welcome back anytime.
Hey, Alex. It's a pleasure talking to you, having a conversation with you. Jake, you're my guy. I'll be on anytime you want me on. Let's get Eric on here next time when we do this.
Oh, absolutely.
Let's get me and Eric on here at the same time. Let us banter back and forth.
Oh yes, we would love that. We've been trying to get Eric on. So if you could spread the word, we'd love to have him on.
I'll make it happen. For you, Jake, I'll make it happen.
Appreciate you, Leroy. You
all right, man.
Be
Much
safe,
love,
man.
Hey, horns up. Horns
up.
All right, later. Bye.
All right, guys. I have Blaine Grisak of Downtown Rams and former co-host back on the show. How we doing, Blaine? Excited to talk some Rams football with you on our 300th episode.
Yeah, no, it's kind of incredible that you got 300 episodes already. Congratulations, and yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, and to start this off, we're gonna ask you about something that has kind of been on the forefront of Rams fans' minds recently. You know, the biggest news to come out of the Rams organization, which is our uniforms. So, what are your thoughts on the Rams' new jerseys? Are they kind of what you expected, or are they completely different than what you were thinking?
I think the writing was on the wall to what they were going to be after the logos came out. You had the split horn, so I think it was kind of expected that most likely on the helmet you were going to get the split wave horn there, and then you had the gradient as a big part of the horn on the logo. So I think that was probably going to be on the jersey somewhere. So they were more or less kind of what I expected. I know a lot of the classic old-timer Rams fans, maybe some of the newer Rams fans that like the old style, weren't happy about them. But overall, I like them. I think they could have came out a lot worse, you know. And I mean, the gradient on the number is a little out of the box, but overall, I think it's a good look. I like the bone gray. That's kind of a unique look that other teams haven't gone with in the past in the NFL. So, you know, maybe the Rams are the first team to have a logo on the helmet. So, maybe the Rams are starting another uniform trend here.
Yeah, that's kind of, what I was picking up with that as well. Bone is really cool. Maybe it was done a little weird because, white and yellow on bone is going to be kind of hard to see what's going on there. But nonetheless, I kind of like it. I kind of like, what they did with that. What were your thoughts on the logos? Because I know, there are people that were really against the logo. I think it grows on me pretty much every day, but I'm not sure if I would wear, any of the logos as on a hat, but I don't think they're as bad as I originally thought. What are your thoughts on them?
So the Rams head one I really like. That's probably my favorite one. The LA, it's growing on me. It's not my favorite, but it's growing on me. I will say, it all comes down to what your expectations were. If you expected the Rams to go back to something from the 1970s, that wasn't going to happen. They weren't going to go back to that, bone helmet that looks like it came from the 1970s. They weren't going to go to just the classic, just the helmet as the logo. It wasn't going to happen. If that's what your expectations were, then you were going to be let down. They were going to do something modern, and I kind of think they missed the mark a little bit on the LA logo. But as far as the Rams head, I think it was a modern take on that Rams skull that was so classic and such a large part of the old-time LA Rams history. So I think they nailed that one, and you can see them kind of taking the fans' voice into account here. On the season ticket holders, what part of the website, you can get a live look in at what the stadium's going to look like eventually. And to start out, the center logo was the LA, and then after they kind of got fans' inputs, they changed it to the Rams skull. So I think it's going to be a process. These might not be the logos long term. They might be the logos long term, but they are what they are right now. And I think, like you said, Jake, they're growing on you day by day. I think that's going to be the case with a lot of fans. It's going to grow on them. Like Demoff has said, these logos, these jerseys, they'll connect with what these players. If Robert Woods scores a touchdown in the end zone, that's going to stick in fans' memories and kind of give them an emotional attachment. So I think as the season kind of goes on and as the logos kind of stick maybe for a little longer, I think they'll start to grow on fans a little bit more than they initially did.
Yeah, and Blaine, we had you on the live stream. You're part of the Downtown Rams live stream for the draft, which was a lot of fun. We covered all 3 days of it. It was intense but fun. And we haven't really gotten the chance to kind of talk to you post-draft about what your thoughts were overall in the Rams draft, if there's anything that significantly stood out to you, anything you liked or disliked. So just kind of, in your opinion, how did you think the Rams did in the draft, and what do you think is going to be something to look out for in this draft class?
I think I'm kind of wait and see on how the class turns out. I do like some of the picks. I love Van Jefferson. I think he's a Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, mix. He's gonna be really good, I think. And I know a lot of fans kind of have Josh Reynolds over him right now, but I think as soon as Van Jefferson puts a DB on skates running with his release and his great route running. I think fans will really like him. Terrell Lewis was a good pick. I'm interested to see if he stays healthy. So I think he's kind of a big question mark in my opinion. The talent's there, but he just needs to stay on the field. And then somebody I was kind of upset about at first that they drafted, but like he really grew on me was Terrell Burgess. I was like, when they took him, I was like, why are they drafting another safety? They just took Taylor Rapp last year. They have John Johnson. Like, why are they taking another safety? And I really think they're going to be able to do a lot of free safety looks with him. And he's going to give them a lot of like capabilities to run multiple sets and a lot of versatility on defense. And I think just kind of, be somebody that can play in the slot, play up top at free safety, just kind of go wherever. So I'm excited to see what he does, especially with the news of Jalen Ramsey, like what his role is going to be and how he said he's not just a cornerback now, like he's going to be all over the place. So I'm excited to see how he works in the defense. And then Bryson Hopkins, not somebody I was a fan of, just taking another tight end. They already have Higbee and Everett, but at the end of the day, like he's a playmaker. And this Rams offense, they kind of seem like they're going to more of a two tight end set. So having that third tight end in Hopkins, and it seems like Everett might be on his way out eventually. So having him there in the fold doesn't hurt either. So I think they did overall well. I'm waiting to see on it, but I like the potential.
Yeah, and Blaine, obviously, we've had plenty of conversations. A lot of people were really bummed the Rams didn't go offensive line until the 7th round. Everyone knows my take on that. Not really a huge fan of, constantly drafting, high, second, third round picks on offensive line. I do feel like eventually you have to develop guys that you grab. What were your thoughts on the Rams kind of, not really putting a premium on the offensive line in this draft?
In a sense, I was a little disappointed, but I wasn't, I guess, totally shocked. You and I have talked about it offline before, and drafting another interior offensive lineman might have created a logjam. I mean, you have Austin Blythe, you have David Edwards, who played pretty well at guard. You have Joseph Noteboom, who's also a guard. You have all these young, and that doesn't even mention you have Bobby Evans, who can play inside and outside. So you have all these pieces, and adding another guard, which is what they needed. They needed an interior offensive line. They're pretty good at tackle with Whitworth. And I mean, Noteboom and Evans and even Edwards could play tackle if you needed them to. They're just so versatile. So I think just drafting another guard would have created a logjam. I'm kind of disappointed they didn't go for somebody like Adeniji or even like a center like Nick Harris out of Washington. But overall, I wasn't surprised they waited, just because I think they do believe in the guys they have. You give these – down the stretch, these guys played really well together. And I think that was the biggest issue. You look at the beginning of the season, and the offensive line played well, and the Rams started out 3-0. And then you have all these offensive linemen get hurt, and you're starting Jamil Demby inside, and he plays terrible. You have all this movement. And I think just getting some cohesion there is going to really help these guys. And it wasn't great as a fan from a fan's perspective watching last year, but them getting experience, that very valuable experience, kind of in the middle of the season, at the end of the season, I think really helps the rookies and their growth going forward.
Yeah, and Blaine, who is one player in your opinion that Rams fans should look out for next season to really have a breakout season?
Oh boy. I think everybody's kind of expecting Higbee to have a big year, so I won't go with him. I think the same with Josh Reynolds. People kind of expect him to have a big year because he'll have more opportunity. But I'm going to go with a rookie. I think Van Jefferson is going to play a much larger role than people expect him to, just because I think he can play. He can play outside, he can play inside, and his route running is exactly what McVeigh needs in his offense. He's the prototypical Sean McVay wide receiver. So I expect him to have a pretty good year, and I think given if the Rams still run a decent amount of 11 personnel and get Jefferson on the field, I think there's a decent – I don't think he'll get Rookie of the Year, but I think he could be kind of be a player that, we're talking about at the end of the season along with – I don't think he's not going to be like in the conversation with Judy or Lamb or anything, but I think he'll be up there as one of the rookie wide receivers that we talk about at the end of the year.
Now, Blaine, looking at the season, the Rams added, Floyd, they added A'Shawn Robinson, do you feel like they did enough in the offseason, moves wise, picking up guys to combat the losses from last season?
I don't. I wrote an article about this a while ago. Going position by position and see if Rams got better, and I don't think they got a ton better. I think they filled some holes, but I know they were They were really they were really tied down by their cap space, but still, I mean, they're paying Leonard Floyd so much money, and that's a deal that's now stretched over. That we learned it's a 1-year deal stretched over 3 years. So this is a player that you're potentially paying for three years for, and he's potentially only going to be on the team for one. I am interested to see how it works out, because I love the A'Shawn Robinson move, and I've been doing some research on Staley and Fangio and how they use defensive linemen, how they kind of play. They play their defensive linemen all over the place on the defensive line, and they play a lot of like 2 defensive line sets where we could see a Brockers Robinson set on the defensive line, and maybe have Donald lined up outside to get him more opportunities. I think having a guy like Robinson opens up a lot for them, and I'm excited to see what Staley brings. But as far as player wise, I like Floyd. He doesn't really excite me. He's a player that he played with Khalil Mack, and he didn't really produce. And I think people forget, letting Dante Fowler go, that before Dante Fowler was on the Rams, like the Rams got no pressure on the edge. That was the year Donald had 20 sacks, and yet you had guys like Ebukam who just couldn't get to the quarterback. And last year, Fowler picks up 12, which is the most for a Rams edge player since Robert Quinn. So no, I don't think they did enough to really get better in areas. I think and then you lose Curley and you place him with the rookie with Akers. That's an unknown. You trade Cooks and you don't really get another over the top threat. So I don't think they got a ton better. But it doesn't really matter what we think now. If these players work together and are very cohesive together and they work in the system, it could all work out.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. That's something that I've said as well, is it feels to me that they didn't really improve, but maybe they were able to replace a couple guys that they lost. But, got to ask you, Jake and I have, kind of expressed our predictions for next season, record-wise. So just curious if you have a prediction for the Rams record next season.
Yeah, I predicted 11-5, but it's a tough schedule. Like, there are 2 stretches that are going to be very important, and it's to start of the year you play the Cowboys, who might be the most talented roster in the NFL, to be frank, and then you play in Philadelphia, and it's not going to be easy to play in Philly. I live in Philly. That's a hostile crowd, and then you travel to Buffalo. So if you come, that's a stretch where you could arguably start the season 0-3. If you can come out of there 2-1, though, I think you're in good shape, because you have New York and Washington next. And then I think the next stretch you look at in the middle of the year, they play San Francisco, Chicago, Miami, and then Seattle and Tampa Bay, and then San Francisco. So that's a really tough – I know Miami's in there, but Miami's an up-and-coming team, I think. That's a tough 5 or 6 game stretch right there. And then Arizona, too. Like they could be a little dangerous. Sean McVay's undefeated against Arizona since being with the Rams, so hopefully that benefits them a little bit. But it's tough. But if some games go their way, I know like last year in 2018 they kind of came on the right end of some 1-score games, and last year they came in on the wrong side of them. If they can come up on the right side of those 1-score games again, I think 11-5 is doable.
Yeah, I tend to lean 11-5 with you. Now, the thing, Blaine, I do want to bring up is a lot of people, including yourself, are saying, the Rams aren't as talented as last year. But I want to make it very clear, at least in my opinion, that I feel like, people are really quick to, like, when you wrote that article, everyone was like, you're saying the Rams have no chance of being better than last year. It doesn't mean they're, just because they're a worse team or not as talented or not as proven, doesn't mean, they're going to fall under the same fate of last year or worse. I still think, with a third-place schedule as opposed to a first-place schedule, they are pretty much set up to be better than last year. And I'd also make the argument, as we wrap this thing up, that last year they really underperformed to their talent. I think they had – obviously they lost some pieces, but that roster was a Super Bowl caliber roster. I think they just totally dropped the ball last year. Obviously injuries happen. Jared Goff just fell off a cliff. You lost Roger Saffold, the offensive line fell down. Todd Gurley wasn't the same. They just didn't really balance the play calling. You could say a lot, but, at the end of the day, I do feel like just because a team was better, equipped, doesn't necessarily mean that they'll have a better outcome, as we saw last year with, in my opinion, one of the biggest letdowns I've seen out of a team.
Yeah, no, I agree. I just like being in Philadelphia, you go back to that, I think it was the 2012 offseason where they signed all those free agents, and you have the famous Vince Young quote, where we could be the dream team. And that team didn't even make the playoffs. So talent on the field doesn't always equate to wins. And that's kind of going back to what I said. This team might not be as talented as they were last year, but if this team, if they work in the system, if they're more cohesive, because I think just that was one of the issues of that last year's team, just the players didn't work together as well as the players worked together in 2018. And it's kind of crazy to say that considering they were in the Super Bowl, back in February, but I just don't think the players work together as they did. And maybe this year's different, that Van Jefferson is a perfect fit in this Rams offense. Terrell Lewis could have a big year off the edge. A'Shaun Robinson is going to be a versatile piece on the defensive line. So if these players work well in the system, big things could happen. I
hear you, man. I think that's going to do it for this interview. Blaine, always a pleasure to have you back on the show. You've been killing it over at downtownrams.com. Be sure to check out his stuff over there. Blaine, you have anything to say before you head out of here?
Just thanks for having me on, and congrats on 300.
All right, guys, we welcome back a special guest of ours. He's been on the show numerous times, Joe Curley, Ventura County Star. And how you doing, Joe? How is everything going? Happy to have you on for the 300th.
Yeah, I'm doing about as well as anybody else is doing. I'm glad that we're still in a position where we're healthy and able to talk football for a second. But it's a thing.
Yeah, totally. And, we're excited to talk to you about a lot of different things. But for starters, we kind of wanted to ask about the big thing that has been the talk of, Rams social media for the past about a month now, I guess. And that is the Rams new uniforms. So we just kind of want to hear your thoughts on that. If you had an idea about what the uniforms were going to be beforehand, and just kind of your overall thoughts.
Well, I think I was worried, and I think I think the response has been kind of, or I guess the result is kind of a mixed bag. I think they obviously got the colors right. I think there's some potential going forward for some exciting stuff. I do think I didn't love the horns. I would have stayed with the traditional horns. I did like the ram head logo. I think updating kind of that old staple is pretty cool. That was maybe my most positive kind of response from everything that came out. The colors in the ram head logo I like. And then I think maybe, I know the uniforms are kind of cool, but I guess the one criticism I have of the uniforms, my main criticism would be the horns. I don't like breaking them up and all the, I would have stayed with the old horns. And I publicly have said I don't like the gradient in the numbers. And I think that my only real point about that is that the point of the numbers, is to identify the players. When you start to mess with them, whether it's white on, color on a color, you see it a lot in high school football and college football where, the numbers become really hard to read. And these numbers seem okay to read, but the gradient, you start to mess with things. I think it's going to be hard to, in tight shots, it's going to be hard to figure out who's who, I think. So, I mean, that's about it. But I do wish they would have stayed with, I think it would have been perfect if they'd have stayed with the old helmets, or the old horns on the helmets, and the no gradients in the numbers, and I would have been 100% happy.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I wasn't a huge fan of the split horn. I've just come to, kind of like just accept it. I'm not really a huge fan of the rebrand. I mean, the thing is, I don't look at it like, oh yeah, this is definitely an upgrade. I look at it like, they could have done a lot worse. I think they could have also done a lot better. But I think they missed the mark, and instead of absolutely completely in my opinion, I think like the way the Falcons did the gradient, like if the Rams did that, I would have been really irritated. But that's only a little part of the puzzle. The next part, of course, is the play on the field, the product on the field, and there are a lot of guys going out that door. Todd Gurley. We're recording this on a Tuesday, and Todd Gurley actually that release of Todd Gurley, which I wasn't a huge fan of. They finally are going to be receiving $5 million in cap today. So they're finally reaping the benefits, if you could say that, today. And they did acquire Van Jefferson in the draft, somebody I really like in this draft. Via the Brandon Cooks trade. They let go of Clay Matthews, which freed up some space. Not enough, in my opinion, but I guess they decided to go on, without him. Eric Weddle retired. So, I mean, there's been a lot of guys, out the door. I think the biggest one, and I'm sure you already know where I'm going with this, is Cory Littleton. I do think there's a significant hole in the middle of that defense. And I think it's, people have come out and said, well, linebackers don't really matter in today's NFL. But yeah, that might be true in a sense, but to just trot out guys with zero NFL experience starting, I don't know if that's the best idea. So, what are your thoughts on the Rams coming into this season, and how good of a team do you think this team can be?
Well, I mean, let's be honest, and let's start big, because I think it's really hard, from my perspective, not to look at what's happening and say this is a team that's rebuilding. And I know it's a, I don't know, it's a scarlet letter, or it's, the Rams are going to come out and announce it. But when you turn over all three of your coordinating positions, when you gut your defense, when you lose, the face of the franchise to save $5.5 million in cap space, even, whether or not that was a good idea or not, which is a good debate, I think. This is a team that is rebuilding when the rest of the division is adding some of the elite players in the league, whether it's a Trent Williams or Don or the receiver, the Arizona guy. The other teams in this division are getting better, and the Rams are. I'm not saying they're not going to get there in the end, but I think that they're figuring some things out. There's just a lot of turnover. And if you're going to turn over all your coordinators, if you're going to turn over, the core, the heart of your defense, the time to do it is not in a pandemic, when you don't have OTAs in person. So I just think there's a lot. And obviously they made these decisions before they knew that was going to happen. But I'm just saying it all adds up to a situation where, they're not in the best position coming into this year. So it's going to be interesting to see how they deal with that. But, going into the year, I wonder, I don't know. I would look at it as a rebuild, maybe a 1-year rebuild, maybe an off-season rebuild, but I think it's a rebuild nonetheless.
Yeah, definitely. That's something that I've kind of said as well. I think this offseason for Rams fans was really surprising. And if it wasn't surprising, it was still kind of disappointing and left a lot of people confused, including myself, at some of the moves that the Rams made and that you mentioned, which kind of goes into my next question, because I was going to ask you your thoughts on the Rams draft this year. And something that I've kind of said about the Rams draft this year is, for starters, I think that this is, from what I've seen, one of the most positive drafts reaction-wise that I've seen the Rams get in a long time. I've seen people actually react more positively than they have in recent years. But something that I said about the draft is I felt like the Rams maybe filled some holes of positions and players that they lost, but I didn't think that we got better per se. Where, as you mentioned, I think the NFC West, both through free agency and the draft, have dramatically improved in the offseason. So I just wanted to hear your thoughts on the draft and if there's anything about the Rams draft that specifically stood out to you.
I mean, it's hard to not like the players individually. I think, certainly I went on another podcast before the draft and we talked about the running back position, and the person said, I'm predicting a running back with their first pick. And I'm like, well, why, when this is a team that's got so many needs on defense, why would you do that? And when you can get value running backs later in the draft or even as a UDFA, and, but they went out and they, use their first pick on a running back, use their second pick on a receiver. I think, overall those picks have been, lauded, and I think people are excited about those two players, and certainly you like the upside of Terrell Lewis, the first defensive pick. I think, once you get into the mid to late third round and beyond, you're really kind of drafting for, upside. These aren't sure things, but you're trying to fill in positions. I love, maybe my favorite pick in the entire draft is Burgess, the Utah safety. I think he's going to be a big deal. I think that's going to be, one thing I didn't get to when I was asked about the defense, and I took it bigger, was that, this is a defense. This is it's an off-season transition. Nothing on this team is more in transition than the defense. And I think, it's because even, they personnel-wise are turning over, the defense from, the type of players that the previous coordinator liked to, obviously they're targeting the types of players that the new coordinator is going to want to build this defense around. I think Burgess is going to be a big part of that. The rest of it are, guys that, we'll see what their impact is. But I wasn't disappointed with the draft. I think my philosophy might be different than, certainly they know more than me. I wouldn't have used a high pick on a running back, but certainly, Cam Akers is, people are excited about Cam Akers. People are excited about Van Jefferson. So, all in all, this is going to be a team offensively that is going to have to score points while this defense kind of figures out what it's happened, how it's playing and kind of gets its feet under it. And so you can't kind of eschew the Rams for spending that high capital on offensive players. But, I was worried about the defense, and I think after the draft I was more worried about the defense.
Yeah, I can understand that. I think their best pick by, just sheer value is absolutely Terrell Burgess. But I wouldn't sleep on the pick of Tremaine Ankrum in the 7th round. And this is somebody that, played on a Clemson offensive line that went up against everybody, so he did a really nice job there. He was at the Senior Bowl, so I wasn't exactly shocked that the Rams looked his way. I was shocked that he went in the 7th round. I compare him. He's very similar to a guy that went in the 1st round, a guy that went to the Patriots with the pick that the Rams traded to them. That's Isaiah Wynn. They're both 6'2". Mm-hmm. They both have very similar frames. I don't really get involved with the whole, he's too short to be an offensive tackle. I can understand the length and everything, but I don't think Tremaine Ankrum is lacking in the length department. I think he's just a little short, and that's totally fine. So I think they might have gotten some really good value there. But now, Joe, I'm going to ask you, because now people are starting to wonder, and I'm not really a huge fan of going out and grabbing a Larry Warford right now because I don't think it's a need. But what would you expect, or, what would you expect the Rams to do now that they've added some cap via the Todd Gurley move? Or, what would you do in this instance? Would you grab another, maybe a veteran linebacker that's out there? Would you grab a veteran, guard? Like, how would you look to spend that money, or would you just save it?
Yeah, I think, I think the Rams' biggest holes coming out of the draft are probably still in the middle of that defense. I don't mind the idea of upgrading the offensive line more, but I think, if they can keep those kids healthy, I think we like the players that they got out of the last couple drafts. From an offensive line, I think the line is just will need some time to kind of transition and have those guys kind of come together. I'm not, I am still worried about the middle of the defense. You brought up Cory Littleton. Cory Littleton was worth, I think is one of the rare occasions where a linebacker is worth giving big money to. Certainly the Rams couldn't do it because of their cap situation, but Cory Littleton was worth the money because he's a two-way linebacker. He's not somebody, he's going to play all three downs. He's somebody who can make an impact, in many different ways. And so I think, I'm still kind of concerned about what the middle of this defense is going to look like. But yeah, if I was going to spend some money and bring in some vets to shore up some spots, me, I'm still, bringing in a blocking tight end. I'm still bringing in, a vet blocking tight end. I'm still bringing in, somebody in the middle of the defense who can help these younger players evolve. And I don't mind the idea of bringing in some depth on the offensive line, but, I do think body-wise, I think they have a good number of young players that are going to get better together. And so I think I'm excited about what that line's going to look like maybe in 21 or 22.
Yeah, and this next question can kind of go anywhere, but I was just curious to hear your thoughts, or I guess I should say your predictions for the Rams next season, whether that be a schedule prediction, a season record prediction, or if there's any players that you think are going to have a breakout season, or if there's anything that Rams fans should be looking for or should be expecting for next season.
Well, I think it's going to be really unpredictable considering the division, considering the turnover, considering no OTAs. We don't know, we've got less data to go on because, we're not seeing the team out there on the field. They're not out there on the field. And I think it's going to be an interesting. There's so little known about what this fall is going to look like, just in terms of games and fans, and but I do think there is a range of outcomes where they can compete in this division, and I like the how they set up to be kind of the underdog, and even though they're going into the stadium, maybe the expectations are going to be tempered a little bit. So I don't think I expect them, to win 11 games and win the division, but I think it's they can get into the playoffs if certain things break right. But if I had to make a prediction now, it wouldn't be much, wouldn't be very far from 8-8, I guess.
Yeah, I hear you there. I think they can make the playoffs. I do have them winning 11 games, but I think that's really due to the fact I think they're playing a third place schedule. And I think they got some lucky breaks too. I will say that they don't have to play really any cold weather games. It's not like they have to go to Foxborough in the cold, or they have to go to Buffalo in the cold. Or Philly. That's one. That's gonna be a hostile crowd. So I think they dodged some bullets there. I do think the NFC West is tougher. When Dick Vermeil came on, he was basically saying, look, they're going to have to split each of those games. They can obviously win them both. That won't hurt them, but they need to at least split all of their division games to have a shot. And I think they can do that. I do. But it'll be interesting. They're going up against teams that you looked at on the schedule previously with the Buccaneers. They beat you last year with Jameis Winston. Now they have Tom Brady, and they have Gronkowski, and it's like kind of a newly, everyone's looking at that team a little different now. They have some sleepers on that schedule, but all in all, I do think that they have an easier schedule than what they could have had. So that's kind of how I feel there. But hey, Joe, we really appreciate you coming on. It's always great to talk to you, and we'll have to have you back on soon. Hopefully, we get some football at the time that we're expecting, but you never know with everything that's going on.
Yeah, congratulations on the milestone. I've always appreciated what you have brought to, the discussion, from a Rams fan perspective. And, you guys keep on, doing what you do. And I appreciate the quick respite from everything else that is swirling around us. So anyway, I'm looking forward to hearing the episode, and you guys stay safe.
Yes, thank you so much. You too.
Later, Joe.
Thanks, guys.